We appreciate every one of you. We'd love to hear. Where are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now let's get into today's story. The blue light from the computer screen cast sharp shadows across Nathan Carter's sharp features as he reviewed the quarterly reports. Outside his office window, rain battered the glass, providing a steady rhythm to his late-night work session. The townhouse felt empty, even though his wife, Lauren, was supposed to be home. Or so she claimed. His mouse hovered over the next spreadsheet when a notification appeared on his screen. Daniel Hayes, his private investigator, had sent the weekly report. Nathan's jaw tightened, but his hand stayed steady as he opened the file. Photos loaded one by one. Lauren's black Lexus pulling into the Galaxy Hotel's parking garage. Timestamp, 7:48 p.m., Thursday. Another photo showed her leaving the elevator an hour later. Her blue cocktail dress, replaced by a gold one she'd said was at the cleaners. The last photo made his fists clench. Mark Sullivan, his business partner, walking out 5 minutes later, adjusting his cufflinks. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. Mr. Carter? Emma, their housekeeper, stood in the doorway. Mrs. Carter called. She said her dinner with Jenna is running late and won't be home until 11. Nathan glanced at his watch. 9:50 p.m. The same time Lauren always called on Thursdays. Thanks, Emma. You can head out for the night. After Emma left, Nathan opened his safe and took out a leather-bound notebook. Inside, he carefully recorded everything. Lauren's new passwords, the gym membership across town, her sudden interest in book club meetings that seemed to lack any actual books. He added tonight's alibi to the growing list. His phone buzzed. A text from Ethan Blake, his corporate lawyer and longtime confidant. Got your message. Breakfast tomorrow? Same spot on 12th Street? Nathan replied, 7 a.m., bring everything you have on Mark's Singapore project. Closing his laptop, he walked to the window, watching as the rain blurred the city lights into streaks. 8 years of partnership with Mark, building Carter and Sullivan Enterprises from a startup into a billion-dollar corporation. 8 years of trust, shattered by a hotel keycard and a gold dress. The front door opened downstairs, followed by the sound of heels on hardwood. Lauren's laugh echoed, polished and performative, perfected at countless charity events. Nathan remained still, listening to her movements. The click of her purse on the console table, shoes kicked off, the rustle of her coat. Nathan, her voice carried upstairs. Still working, darling? He turned, schooling his features into a mask of calm. Just wrapping up? How was dinner with Jenna? Lauren appeared in the doorway, her brunette hair damp from the rain. The gold dress was gone. Oh, Jenna. 2 glasses of wine, and suddenly it's a therapy session. She leaned in, kissing his cheek. Her signature perfume carried a faint trace of a cologne Nathan had noticed on Mark last week. You work too hard, she teased. Come to bed. In a bit. Need to finish these reports for tomorrow's meeting. She pouted playfully. What would this company do without you? Her phone buzzed from her bag. She glanced at it, her expression flickering briefly before putting it away. Don't stay up too late. After she left, Nathan sat back at his desk and opened an email to Daniel Hayes. Continue the surveillance. Focus on financial details, every restaurant tab, hotel bill, gift purchase, and dig deeper into Mark's accounts. He hit send, leaning back as memories of the company's 5th anniversary party surfaced. That night, he'd introduced Mark to Lauren. Charming, charismatic, everything Nathan knew his wife admired. Now, he wondered if it had started there, if every laugh and glance had been part of this betrayal. The rain intensified, muffling the sound of Lauren's shower upstairs. Nathan pulled up the company's organizational chart on his screen, studying the connections. Mark might have Lauren, but Nathan had spent years building something far more powerful. A network of loyal employees, board members who trusted him, and enough evidence of Mark's questionable decisions to destroy him professionally. His phone buzzed again. A text from Marcy Hill, the CFO, who had been vocal about her concerns over Mark's recent moves. Tomorrow's breakfast with Ethan was only the beginning. Marcy would play a critical role in what came next. A final text lit up the screen. Mark, drinks tomorrow? Need to talk about Singapore. Nathan's lips curled into a cold smile as he replied, can't. Breakfast meeting with Ethan. Rain check? Nathan shut down his computer and gathered his papers, listening to Lauren's movements in their bedroom above. Let her think she was clever, that her excuses and stolen moments were going unnoticed. Nathan had learned long ago that success, much like strategy, required patience, precision, and the ability to see 10 moves ahead while your opponent was still playing checkers. Tomorrow, he would begin positioning his pieces. But tonight, he would go upstairs and play the role of the devoted, unsuspecting husband one last time. After all, the best victories were the ones your opponents never saw coming until it was too late. The corner cafe on 12th Street was nearly empty at 6:55 a.m. when Nathan claimed his usual booth in the back. Margaret, the elderly waitress who'd been serving him breakfast for over a decade, brought his black coffee without asking. The usual, Mr. Carter? Thanks, Margaret. Make it two. Daniel's joining me. She nodded, glancing at the stack of folders on the table. Looks like serious business today. Always is, he replied, offering a rare smile that softened his usually stern features. Daniel Hayes arrived 5 minutes later, his suit slightly wrinkled from what Nathan guessed was another late night. The lawyer's briefcase was stuffed with documents as he slid into the booth. You look like hell, Nathan remarked, pushing a coffee cup toward him. Spent all night going through Mark Singapore. Files, Daniel said, taking a long sip of coffee. It's worse than we thought, Nathan. The whole project is built on speculation and shady accounting. Margaret returned with their plates, egg white omelets and wheat toast, a nod to their wives' health-conscious habits. Nathan waited until she was out of earshot before speaking. Show me everything. Daniel pulled out a series of documents, spreading them across the table between bites of toast. He's been inflating projected returns, using outdated market data to justify the investments. But here's the kicker. Look at the subsidiary managing the contracts. Nathan studied the papers, his fork pausing midair. Sullivan Pacific Holdings? When did he set this up? 3 months ago, right around the time Lauren started her weekly dinner meetings with Jenna. Daniel's tone was carefully neutral. The company's registered in Singapore, but its ownership is buried under layers of shell corporations. He's funneling development fees through it, marking up costs by 30%. The board doesn't know? Not yet. But Randall Pierce has been asking questions. You know how thorough he is on audit reviews. Nathan nodded slowly, recalling Randall's critical support during the merger that created Carter and Sullivan Enterprises. What about Stephanie? Does Mark's wife suspect anything? She's been too busy planning her foundation's annual gala. Daniel hesitated. There's something else. My new girlfriend, Sarah. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Lauren's friend? Yeah, we've been seeing each other for a few weeks. Over dinner last night, she mentioned something. Apparently, Lauren's been asking about divorce lawyers, specifically ones who specialize in high net worth cases. Nathan's expression tightened ever so slightly. Has she? Sarah thinks Lauren's planning to leave you. She and Mark have been meeting at the Galaxy Hotel every Thursday for 3 months. Nathan's voice stayed calm. I know. Daniel stared at him. How long? Long enough, Nathan replied, pulling out his phone and showing him photos from the private investigator. I needed to be certain before acting. Now I am. What's your plan? First, we get Marcy Hill's cooperation. As CFO, her concerns about the Singapore project will carry weight with the board. Nathan took a deliberate sip of coffee. Then, we quietly approach other board members. Randall's audit questions are perfectly timed. And Lauren? Daniel asked. Nathan's eyes hardened. Let her think she's winning. She wants to leave? Fine. But it'll be on my terms, not hers. Margaret reappeared with the coffee pot. Refill, gentlemen. Nathan waited until she left before turning back to Daniel. How fast can you freeze Mark's access to the corporate accounts? With enough evidence of mismanagement? 24 hours. But we'd need Marcy's approval. Nathan glanced at his watch. She'll be in her office by now. Tell her I'd like to meet for lunch. That new place near the office she's been wanting to try. Nathan gathered the documents, his movements precise and controlled. One more thing. I need you to start divorce proceedings quietly. But don't file anything yet. Nathan, Daniel leaned forward, his tone cautious. Are you sure about this? Once we start, There's no going back. Nathan placed several bills on the table, enough to cover their breakfast and leave Margaret a generous tip. Mark brought this on himself. He could have had anyone, but he chose my wife. Now he'll lose everything. His company, his reputation, his marriage. And Lauren? A cold smile tugged at the corners of Nathan's mouth. She'll learn that betrayal comes with consequences. He stood straightening his tie. Send me the Singapore documents. I've got a board meeting at 10, and it's time we started asking some very public questions about our expansion strategy. Daniel watched his friend walk out, remembering the focused but cautious young man he had met in law school. That Nathan Carter had been ambitious but reserved. This one moved with the calculated precision of a predator closing in on its prey. The lawyer pulled out his phone and dialed Marcy Hill's number. Whatever was coming, Mark Sullivan and Lauren Carter had no idea they had already lost before the game even began. Marcy Hill's office occupied the corner of the 42nd floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. When Nathan arrived at 1 p.m., she was already arranging documents on the conference table. I ordered lunch in, she said without looking up. Figured we'd need privacy for this. Nathan studied the CFO, her sharp features, the reading glasses perched on her nose, the meticulous way she lined up the financial reports. Marcy had been with the company for 6 years, brought in for her reputation as a financial watchdog. She had never trusted Mark's charm. How bad is it? Nathan asked, taking a seat. Marcy removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Remember when I flagged those irregularities in the Q2 reports? It goes deeper. She slid several spreadsheets toward him. Mark's been manipulating project costs, creating ghost vendors, inflating consulting fees. The Singapore expansion is just the tip of the iceberg. A knock interrupted them as their lunch arrived on a cart. They waited until the delivery person left before continuing. Show me everything, Nathan said, unwrapping his sandwich. For the next hour, Marcy walked him through a tangled web of financial misconduct. Shell companies, backdated contracts, suspicious wire transfers. With each revelation, Nathan's expression grew colder. The thing is, Marcy said, pulling up another document on her laptop, he's getting sloppy. Look at these expense reports. Dinner for 2 foot at Le Cirque, charged to business development. A suite at the Galaxy Hotel, billed as client meetings. Every Thursday. Nathan's voice was dangerously quiet. Marcy glanced at him sharply. Yes. Nathan, is there something I should know? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from Lauren. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Red heart emoji. He showed Marcy the message, then pulled up the PI's photos. Her eyes widened as she flipped through them. That bastard. Nathan, I'm so sorry. Don't be. You've just given me exactly what I needed. He leaned forward. The board meeting next month. I need you to present a full audit of the Singapore project. Every inconsistency, every questionable decision. They'll crucify him. That's the idea. Nathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. But first, I need you to meet someone. Right on cue, there was another knock. Daniel entered, briefcase in hand. Miss Hill, he nodded. I believe you have some documents for me? The next 2 hours were spent strategizing. Marcy provided copies of everything. Daniel took notes, and Nathan watched the city lights flicker on as dusk fell. One last thing, he said as they wrapped up. This stays between us. Mark thinks he's untouchable. Let's keep it that way. Back in his office, Nathan found a message from Stephanie Sullivan, Mark's wife. The annual charity gala for her foundation was next weekend. Would he be attending? He typed a quick confirmation, then called Daniel. How much does Stephanie know about the foundation's funding? Nothing yet. Why? Because Mark's been using company donations to fund it. Once the board reviews Marcy's audit, the donations will stop, Daniel concluded. Nathan, that foundation is Stephanie's passion project. Nathan nodded. Then maybe we should ensure she has other funding options. Set up a meeting with her next week. Frame it as a discussion about increasing company support for the foundation. After hanging up, Nathan stood by the window, gazing out at the city. Somewhere below, Lauren was likely with Mark, both of them confident they could outsmart him. His phone buzzed with another message from Lauren. Miss you. Having drinks with the girls. Don't work too hard. Nathan didn't bother replying. Instead, he opened his email and began drafting a message to Randall Pierce about scheduling an emergency board meeting. The pieces were in place, allies secured. It was all about timing now. He glanced at the framed photo on his desk. Him and Mark at the company's launch, both grinning, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Tomorrow, he'd take it down. Tonight, it served as a reminder. In both business and marriage, trust was the sharpest weapon when turned against you. As night blanketed the city, Nathan remained at the window. In his reflection, he saw not a betrayed husband, but a strategist, methodically positioning his pieces in a game his adversaries didn't even realize they were playing. The morning sun illuminated the floor-to-ceiling windows of Carter and Sullivan Enterprises boardroom, casting sharp shadows across the polished mahogany table. Board members filtered in, their usual chatter muted by the weight of the day's agenda. Mark Sullivan's proposed expansion plan. Mark stood confidently at the head of the table, his demeanor polished as he handed out sleek presentation folders. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to present will redefine our presence in the Asian market, he began, his tone smooth but rehearsed. Nathan sat quietly, observing as Mark's tailored suit failed to conceal the faint tremor in his hands. Beside Nathan, Marcy Hill silently organized her stack of documents, financial reports that starkly contradicted Mark's optimistic pitch. The Singapore project represents an unprecedented opportunity, Mark continued, advancing his PowerPoint slides. Our $500 million investment will yield returns of 30% within 18 months. Randall Pierce, the silver-haired head of the audit committee, adjusted his glasses. Ambitious projections, Mark. What's your basis for these numbers? Mark's smile stiffened slightly. Market analysis and preliminary agreements with local partners. The details are outlined in your packets. Randall opened his folder, pulling out a separate document. Interesting, because the latest market reports from Singapore indicate a 15% decline in the sector you're targeting. The room grew colder as murmurs swept through the board members. Mark's smile wavered, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. Those reports must be outdated. Our research shows. I'd like to hear from our CFO, Nathan interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to him as he made his first comment of the meeting. Marcy, what's your analysis of the financial implications? Marcy stood, her expression composed as she connected her laptop to the projector. The screen filled with detailed charts and figures, prompting several board members to lean in. My team conducted a comprehensive review of the proposed expansion, she began, pointing to key statistics with her laser pointer. The returns presented by Mr. Sullivan assume a best-case scenario that contradicts current market conditions. Additionally, we've identified several irregularities in the initial expenditures. Mark's face flushed red. Those numbers are preliminary. I can explain. Please do, Nathan interjected smoothly. Particularly the $2.3 million in consulting fees paid to Sullivan Pacific Holdings, a company registered in Singapore just 3 months ago. The room erupted in whispers as board members exchanged uneasy glances. Mark's grip tightened on the table edge, his knuckles white. That's standard practice for international operations, he stammered. We needed a local entity. A local entity that lists you as the sole beneficiary? Randall's question cut through the tension like a knife. That's not standard practice, Mark. That's a conflict of interest. Mark turned to Nathan, desperation seeping into his voice. You know how these deals work? Sometimes we need flexible arrangements to navigate local regulations. Nathan met his gaze, his expression cold and composed. Do those flexible arrangements usually include charging personal expenses to the company? Like weekly bookings at the Galaxy Hotel? The room fell silent. Mark's face turned from flushed red to a ghostly pale as the presentation screen displayed a detailed expense report with the hotel charges highlighted in glaring red. I moved to suspend the expansion plan pending a full audit, Randall declared. And I recommend freezing all discretionary spending until we understand the extent of these irregularities. I second the motion, another board member chimed in. Mark's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies. But the same faces that had welcomed his proposal minutes earlier now stared back in disapproval. This is ridiculous. Nathan, we built this company together. You can't, all in favor? Nathan's voice was steady, controlled. Hands rose around the table one by one. Mark watched in disbelief as his empire began slipping away. Motion carried. Nathan stated firmly. Marcy, please ensure all relevant accounts are secured by the end of the day. Mark, you'll make yourself available to the audit team for any questions. As the board members filed out, Mark stayed frozen in his chair, his eyes fixed on the damning figures still displayed on the screen. Nathan calmly gathered his papers, fully aware of Mark's gaze burning into him. How long have you known? Mark's voice was barely audible, more a whisper than a question. Nathan paused at the door. Long enough to know that betrayal takes many forms, Mark. He turned to meet his former partner's gaze directly. Some professional, his words lingered before he continued, and some personal. The color drained from Mark's face as the realization hit him. Before he could muster a response, Nathan's phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. Lunch today? Miss you. Nathan glanced at the screen. You should answer that, he said, noting how Mark's hand instinctively reached for his own phone. It might be important. Without another word, Nathan left Mark sitting amidst the wreckage of his ambitions. In the elevator, Nathan typed out a quick message to Daniel. First piece has fallen. Proceed with Phase 2. Nathan's home office had become his command center, the nerve hub for orchestrating the systematic unraveling of Mark Sullivan's world. The warm evening light spilled through the windows, casting sharp shadows across his desk as he reviewed the latest audit findings. The soft click of heels on hardwood announced Lauren's arrival before she appeared in the doorway, her designer outfit worth more than most people's rent. You've been impossible to reach all day, she remarked. Nathan didn't lift his eyes from the report. Board meeting ran long. Mark's expansion plan didn't go as smoothly as he expected. Lauren's perfectly manicured fingers gripped her phone just a little too tightly. Oh, that's surprising. He seemed so confident about it. Confidence doesn't always equal competence, Nathan replied, finally looking up to catch the faint smudge of her recently reapplied lipstick. How was your day? Fine. Lunch with Jenna, then some shopping. She shifted her weight, a subtle tell Nathan had long associated with her lies. You've been working so much lately, I barely see you anymore. The Singapore situation requires attention. His gaze remained fixed on her as he spoke. Mark's decisions have put the company in a precarious position. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it quickly, her face flickering with barely concealed unease. I'll let you get back to it. Will you be up soon? Don't wait up. After she left, Nathan reopened his laptop, pulling up the latest surveillance photos. Lauren and Mark at their usual table at Louvre Bernardin, his hand resting over hers, their heads close together in whispered conversation. The photos were accompanied by a note from the PI. Sullivan appeared agitated. Meeting lasted 47 minutes. His phone rang. Daniel Hayes. The charity gala is this weekend, his lawyer reminded him. Stephanie Hopkins confirmed your attendance. Perfect. And Lauren? Jenna convinced her to go shopping for a new dress tomorrow. She'll make sure Lauren picks something memorable. The weekend arrived with the kind of flawless weather event planners dream about. The Hopkins Foundation's annual gala transformed the rooftop garden of the Carter Museum into a dazzling display of Seattle's elite. Nathan arrived fashionably late, noting with satisfaction how Mark and Lauren kept their distance, exchanging furtive glances when they thought no one was watching. Stephanie Hopkins approached, radiant in midnight blue. Nathan, I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it. He kissed her cheek, aware of Mark watching from across the garden. Your foundation's work is incredible, Stephanie. I've been reviewing the impact reports. You're too kind. She smiled warmly. Though I admit, I'm a bit concerned about next year's funding. Mark's been unusually vague about the company's usual contribution. Has he? Nathan guided her toward a quieter corner. Actually, I've been meaning to discuss that with you. Your educational initiatives particularly interest me. As they spoke, Nathan positioned them within earshot of Lauren and Jenna, who were pretending not to notice Mark's increasingly frantic attempts to engage board members who suddenly found their drinks and conversation elsewhere. "Your work is remarkable," Nathan said, raising his voice slightly. "It would be a shame if anything jeopardized its funding." Stephanie's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say it might be worth reviewing the foundation's financial structure. Perhaps over lunch next week, I might have some suggestions for ensuring its long-term stability." Later, as the evening wound down, Nathan observed Lauren and Mark sharing a brief, tense exchange near the elevators. The way they kept their distance, Lauren's hands twisting her clutch, the slight shake of Mark's head, all of it revealed their growing panic. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcy. Audit team found something big. Emergency board meeting called for Monday. Nathan smiled faintly, sipping his champagne as he watched his wife and his business partner realize the walls of their carefully constructed world were closing in. The trap was nearly ready to spring. Timing, as always, was everything. Monday morning arrived with a steady rain, turning Seattle into a sea of black umbrellas and gridlock traffic. Nathan sat in his office, watching the rain streak the windows as reports from the audit team filled his inbox. A knock on the door revealed Daniel, looking more serious than usual. Mark's been trying to access restricted accounts all morning. 3 attempts to wire funds to Singapore. Desperate men make desperate choices. Nathan turned from the window. What's his financial position? Bad and getting worse. He's leveraged everything on this expansion, with the board freezing the project. Daniel shook his head. He's starting to crack. As if on cue, Mark burst into the office, his usual composure replaced by barely concealed panic. "This has gone far enough, Nathan. Call off the audit." "Sit down, Mark." Nathan's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "Daniel, give us a minute." After Daniel left, Mark paced like a caged animal. "You're tearing everything down, everything we built. Over what? A corporate disagreement? Is that what we're calling it?" Nathan's voice remained calm and measured. "This afternoon, the board will receive a full report on your financial misconduct. Unauthorized accounts, embezzled funds, fictitious consultancy fees." He paused. "Personal expenses charged to the company, including quite a few hotel rooms." Mark froze. "Nathan, don't." Nathan raised a hand, silencing him. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't notice my wife and my business partner stealing? Not just my money, but my time, my trust." "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." Nathan opened a folder on his desk. "You've been sloppy, Mark. The affair made you reckless. And now, you'll lose everything. Your position, your reputation, your marriage. You can't prove anything." "I already have." Nathan slid the folder across the desk. "The board meeting is at 2. I suggest you use the time until then to consider your resignation. It might save what little is left of your reputation." Mark snatched up the folder, his hands trembling as he flipped through the evidence of his downfall. Without another word, he stormed out. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By lunchtime, word had spread throughout the office that something significant was unfolding. Nathan worked through his sandwich, reviewing his presentation for the board one final time. His phone lit up with a text from Lauren. "We need to talk. Come into your office." Minutes later, she appeared in his doorway, her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "What have you done to Mark?" "I haven't done anything to Mark," Nathan replied calmly. "His own actions have caught up with him. He's falling apart. He called me this morning, talking about leaving the country." "And you're worried about your lover or your lifestyle?" Nathan's question cut through her protests. "Don't worry, Lauren. You'll both get exactly what you deserve." She stared at him, realization dawning. "You knew. All this time, you knew about us. Did you really think you were that clever? The Wednesday night girls' dinners, the mysterious business meetings." He stood, walking to the window. "You should head home, Lauren. Pack what matters to you. The next few days will be unpleasant. You can't do this to us." "I already have." He turned back to her, his expression devoid of emotion. "It's done, Lauren. All of it." She opened her mouth to argue, but his intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carter? The board is assembling." "Thank you, Sarah." He gathered his papers. You should go, Lauren. Your boyfriend has an important meeting to attend. Nathan walked into the boardroom at exactly 2 o'clock, followed by Marcy Hill and Daniel Hayes. Mark sat alone at the far end of the table, his usual allies conspicuously absent. For the next hour, Marcy methodically presented their findings. Bank statements, wire transfers, falsified reports. Evidence mounted like a tidal wave, erasing the last shred of Mark's credibility. When the final vote was called, it was unanimous. Mark Sullivan was removed from his position. His access to company resources terminated immediately. As security arrived to escort him from the building, he turned to Nathan one last time. You've won. Are you happy now? Nathan straightened his tie, a gesture so ordinary it felt out of place amid the ruins of Mark's career. Happiness was never the goal, Mark. Justice was. Later that evening, Nathan sat in his home office, waiting. The house creaked with familiar sounds. Lauren's heels clicking on the stairs, her nervous energy palpable even through the closed door. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from Daniel. It's done. All accounts frozen. Divorce papers ready. Nathan closed his laptop, listening to the sound of his wife's approaching footsteps. The trap had closed perfectly, but there was still one final act to play out. Rain lashed against the windows of Nathan's study as Lauren paced before his desk, her designer heels tapping against the hardwood floor. Her earlier bravado had begun to crack under his unervingly calm gaze. Why aren't you angry? She demanded, her voice rising. I just told you I've been with your business partner for months. Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her as though she were an experiment yielding predictable results. Tell me, Lauren, in all those months of sneaking around with Mark, did you ever wonder why it seemed so easy? Why I never questioned your Wednesday night dinners or your sudden interest in Jenna's dating life? The color drained from her face. What do you mean? I mean, he said, opening his laptop, that Mark's about to learn an important lesson about mixing pleasure with business. He turned the screen toward her, displaying a series of documents that made her sink into the nearest chair. That's impossible, she whispered. The board's emergency meeting concluded an hour ago, Nathan continued. Mark's mismanagement and financial misconduct forced an immediate restructuring. A cold smile played at his lips. Your lover doesn't know it yet, but his company now belongs to me and his wife. Lauren's manicured nails dug into the armrests. You're lying. Mark would have told me if he were losing everything? If his Singapore project was a house of cards built on stolen funds? Nathan's calm tone was sharper than any accusation. Nathan stood and walked to his drink cart. Mark's too busy watching his empire crumble to warn his mistress. Would you like to see the termination papers? They're quite thorough. Termination? Lauren shot to her feet. You can't fire him. He built this company with you. And then he betrayed everything we built, Nathan replied, pouring himself a glass of scotch without offering her one. The board voted unanimously. Mark will be removed as CEO tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, Stephanie has already filed for divorce, armed with evidence of his financial misconduct. Lauren collapsed back into her chair, her arrogant facade completely shattered. Stephanie knows? About the affair? Not yet. He took a measured sip. But about Mark using company funds to finance your little rendezvous? About the shell companies and misappropriated assets? Oh yes. She's quite grateful for my help in protecting her foundation's interests. The foundation? Lauren's eyes widened as the implications hit her. The charity gala. When you told Stephanie it would be a shame if anything threatened the funding. I was ensuring she understood her options, Nathan interrupted, his voice cold. His phone buzzed, a message from Daniel, confirming the final preparations. Just as I'm ensuring you understand yours. Lauren straightened, desperation replacing shock. Nathan, please. We can work through this. I made a terrible mistake, but save your performance, he cut her off. I've watched you play the devoted wife for months. It's not convincing anymore. You cold-hearted bastard, she hissed, her voice turning venomous. You set us up. All those business meetings, the late nights at the office. You were orchestrating this. No, Lauren. You and Mark orchestrated your own downfall. I simply made sure you had enough rope to hang yourselves. He turned to the window, watching the raindrops trace patterns on the glass. Mark chose to embezzle company funds to impress his mistress. You chose to betray our marriage for cheap thrills with my business partner. I merely chose the consequence. Lauren's phone buzzed, Mark's name flashing on the screen. Nathan smiled as she stared at it, panic rising in her eyes. You should answer that, he suggested. I imagine he has quite a lot to say about tomorrow's board announcement. Lauren's hands shook as she picked up her phone, scrolling through the string of increasingly frantic messages from Mark. This will destroy him, she whispered. That was the point, Nathan replied, his voice devoid of remorse. Did you really think you could flaunt your affair, spend my money on your escapades, and face no consequences? I'll fight you, she threatened weakly. Both of us will. He laughed, the sound utterly devoid of warmth. Lauren, Mark is facing criminal charges for financial fraud. His assets are frozen, his reputation is in ruins, and his wife's lawyers are circling. He won't be fighting anyone except prosecutors. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the storm of emotions crossing Lauren's face. Her phone buzzed again, another desperate message from Mark. He's being escorted out of the building as we speak, Nathan informed her, his tone matter of fact. Security is quite efficient when properly motivated. Lauren stood on unsteady legs, her earlier confidence now replaced by naked fear. What happens now? Now, Nathan said, returning to his desk and pulling out a thick envelope. You leave. He slid the envelope across the desk. The divorce papers are ready. Your belongings will be moved to storage, and your access to our accounts has already been terminated. You can't just, I can, and I have, Nathan interrupted. The prenuptial agreement you so carelessly signed is quite specific about infidelity. You'll find the terms ungenerous. Lauren stared at the envelope, tears finally spilling from her eyes. But Nathan saw no genuine remorse in them, only the dawning realization that her carefully constructed world was collapsing. Why like this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You could have confronted us months ago. I could have, Nathan replied, his tone as cold as the storm outside. But then, you wouldn't have learned what betrayal truly costs. Nathan's expression remained impassive, because revenge, like business, requires patience and precision. You chose Mark because you thought he was the more powerful partner. I wanted you both to understand just how wrong you were. Lauren's phone buzzed one final time. Mark again, but this time with news that made her sink back into the chair, her face draining of color. Ah, Nathan observed, noting her reaction. I see he's heard from Stephanie's lawyers. Timing is everything, isn't it? The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows as Lauren grasped the full magnitude of her choices. In one evening, she had lost her marriage, her lifestyle, and the man she had risked everything to be with. And Nathan, the husband she had so catastrophically underestimated, simply watched her world fall apart with the same calm detachment he had maintained throughout their entire sham of a marriage. The following morning dawned bright and unrelenting. Mark Sullivan's final arrival at Carter and Sullivan Enterprises was captured by a dozen smartphone cameras. Security guards stood at the entrance, their presence sending a clear message to the disgraced executive. I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, the head of security, James said, blocking his path. Your access has been revoked. Mark's face twisted with rage. This is my company. I built this. Not anymore, James replied calmly. Daniel Hayes emerged from the lobby, flanked by two corporate attorneys. The board's decision is final, Mark. Don't make this more embarrassing than it already is. Employees gathered at windows, watching their former CEO's meltdown. Mark's perfectly tailored suit couldn't conceal the sweat soaking his collar as he jabbed a finger at Daniel. Where's Nathan? Too afraid to face me himself. Mr. Carter is in a board meeting, Daniel replied with professional detachment. Discussing the company's transition with our new partners, including Mrs. Sullivan. The mention of his wife's name struck Mark like a blow. Stephanie? What do you mean? She's been instrumental in stabilizing the foundation's future. Daniel handed him a thick envelope. These are from her lawyers. Along with the divorce papers, you'll find a detailed accounting of your financial misconduct. Mark's hands trembled as he tore open the envelope. His face turned from red to ashen as he read. This is impossible. These accounts were private. Nothing is private when you misuse company resources for personal gain, Daniel said, checking his watch. A car is waiting to take you home. I suggest you use the rest of today to pack your office. Under supervision, of course. Inside the building, Marcy Hill watched from her office as Mark was escorted to gather his belongings. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Status? He's here. Starting to understand what he's lost. Good. Keep me updated. Down in the lobby, Lauren's attempt at damage control met with similar resistance. She had arrived still wearing last night's clothes, mascara streaked from tears, demanding to see Nathan. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, the receptionist said with no sympathy. You've been removed from the authorized visitor list. Removed? Lauren's voice rose, drawing stares from passing employees. I'm his wife. Not for much longer, a familiar voice interjected. Jenna stood by the security desk, her previous warmth replaced by icy satisfaction. Lauren, don't embarrass yourself further. Lauren spun around to face her former friend. Jenna, what are you doing here? Watching karma in action, Jenna replied, adjusting her visitor badge, now labeled with legal department. Those Wednesday night covers you needed? She smiled coldly. They were my idea. I passed every detail to Daniel. My boyfriend found them quite intriguing. The color drained from Lauren's face as the full scope of her isolation became clear. Even her closest confidant had been part of Nathan's carefully constructed plan. You were spying on me? All those times I confided in you. All those times you bragged about fooling your husband? Jenna's smile was sharp, her voice cutting. About how Nathan was too distracted by work to notice. Turns out he noticed more than you thought. Security approached as Lauren's voice escalated into a shriek. Upstairs, Mark watched from the conference room where he was packing his things, helpless to intervene or even acknowledge her without worsening his already dire situation. Meanwhile, in the main boardroom, Nathan sat with Stephanie Sullivan, reviewing the foundation's updated funding structure. The board has approved a 5-year commitment, he explained, sliding documents across the table. Your educational initiatives will be fully funded, independent of any changes in company leadership. Stephanie's hands were steady as she sighed. I should have seen what Mark was doing. He fooled a lot of people, Nathan replied, his tone devoid of judgment. The question is, what do you want to do now? Her voice hardened. Protect what I've built. Mark can lose everything else, but he won't take my foundation. Down with him. Their meeting was interrupted by a commotion from the lobby. Through the glass walls, they saw Lauren being escorted out, her dignity in tatters as she screamed accusations at anyone who would listen. Hell hath no fury, Stephanie remarked dryly. Like a gold digger scorned, Nathan finished, turning back to their papers. Now about the new board structure. The day unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of downfall. Mark's personal belongings were boxed and sent to his soon-to-be former home. His executive parking space was reassigned. His name was removed from company letterhead. By evening, social media was buzzing with news of the power shift at Carter and Sullivan Enterprises. Business analysts speculated about the future of the Singapore project, while society columnists whispered about the twin divorces shaking Seattle's elite. In his office, Nathan watched as night settled over the city. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages. Board members pledging their support, employees expressing loyalty, reporters seeking comments. One message stood out, from Lauren. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything. He typed back a single response, no, Lauren. You did that yourself. 2 months passed like a cleansing storm. The newly renamed Carter International's lobby displayed a sleek new logo, with all traces of the Sullivan name erased from the building's gleaming surfaces. Employees whispered about the changes, not with fear, but with a mix of awe and respect for the precision with which Nathan had executed his takeover. In his expanded corner office, Nathan reviewed the latest quarterly reports. The numbers told a story of recovery and growth. Investor confidence restored, stock prices stabilizing, the Singapore project restructured under competent management. A knock at his door revealed Marcy Hill, carrying a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. Thought you might want to celebrate. The SEC just closed their investigation into Mark's activities. Criminal charges? Nathan accepted a glass. Multiple counts of financial fraud, Marcy confirmed, settling into the chair across from him. His lawyers are scrambling for a plea deal. The evidence was airtight. Nathan's lips curved into a slight smile. Daniel is thorough. Speaking of thorough, Marcy continued, setting her glass down. Lauren's divorce was finalized this morning. Jenna said she's moved in with her sister in Oregon. Running away was always her specialty, Nathan replied, turning to the wall of windows, watching his empire's reflection shimmer against the cityscape. Have you seen today's society pages? Marcy pulled up an article on her tablet. Double divorce drama. Seattle power couples fall from grace. The accompanying photo showed Mark leaving court, looking years older, dodging reporters while clutching a briefcase of legal documents. Stephanie's foundation is thriving, Marcy noted. Her new board appointment suits her. She earned it, Nathan said, his voice tinged with genuine respect. Unlike some, she understood the value of building something real. His phone buzzed, an email from Daniel. Mark's remaining assets had been seized. The man who had once co-founded Carter and Sullivan Enterprises now faced possible jail time. His reputation in ruins, his social standing obliterated. You planned this perfectly, Marcy remarked, echoing the whispers circulating through corporate circles. Nathan turned back from the window. Not planned, he corrected. I just made sure I was prepared for anything. In business and in life, that's all we can do. A comfortable silence fell as they watched the city lights emerge against the darkening sky. Below, workers streamed out of the building, heading home to lives untouched by the drama that had unfolded in the corporate heights above. Do you regret any of it? Marcy asked finally. The way it ended? Nathan considered the question, recalling Lauren's tear-streaked face as she packed her things, Mark's desperate attempts to salvage his reputation, and the swift, calculated execution of a plan months in the making. They made their choices, he said at last. I simply ensured those choices had consequences. His computer chimed with a new message. Latest quarterly projections showing Carter International's strongest performance to date. Success, it seemed, was the ultimate revenge. What now? Marcy asked, refilling their glasses. Now. Nathan picked up the latest acquisition proposal his team had prepared. Now we build something stronger, something that can't be compromised by weak men or faithless wives. The city sparkled beyond his windows, a testament to power, ambition, and the careful calculation of a man who had turned betrayal into triumph. His phone buzzed one final time, a message from Daniel about another successful quarter, another victory in the endless game of corporate chess. Nathan smiled, knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's carefully invested. In the end, he hadn't just reclaimed his company. He had transformed it into something unshakable. He'd rebuilt it into something greater, proving that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the strength to rebuild from the ashes of betrayal. The night spread its dark wings over Seattle, but in his office high above the city, Nathan Carter sat, surrounded by the fruits of his calculated patience. He'd lost a wife and a business partner, but gained something far more valuable. The knowledge that in the game of love and business, the winner isn't the one who strikes first, but the one who strikes last. As he reviewed the company's latest reports, watching the evidence of his success scroll across a screen, he knew his revenge hadn't been about punishment. It had been about transformation. Carter International would rise stronger, its foundation no longer compromised by the weak links of betrayal and deceit. The city lights twinkled beyond his office window, a constellation of possibilities stretching into the future. His phone buzzed with messages from board members, business partners, and employees, all aligned with his vision, all part of the new empire he'd forged from the ashes of betrayal. Nathan leaned back in his chair, a rare smile crossing his face. Sometimes, he reflected, the best revenge isn't just about destroying what was lost. It's about building something better in its place. And as the night deepened over his reformed kingdom, he knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one written entirely on his own terms. Epilogue 5 years later, the Seattle skyline had transformed. New towers reaching toward the clouds, but none stood as prominently as the gleaming headquarters of Carter International. The company's evolution from a partnership built on betrayal to a global powerhouse under Nathan Carter's sole leadership had become a Harvard Business School case study in corporate resilience. Inside his expanded office suite on the top floor, Nathan reviewed the latest acquisition reports. The company's market value had tripled since Mark Sullivan's dramatic fall, each success a testament to the truth Nathan had always known. Some betrayals, handled properly, could become opportunities. A knock at his door revealed Daniel Hayes, now Carter International's chief legal officer, and his wife, Jenna. Their marriage 2 years ago had been a quiet celebration of another victory. The union of two people who had helped orchestrate one of Seattle's most notorious downfalls. "Thought you'd want to see this," Daniel said, placing a newspaper on Nathan's desk. The headline made him smile. Former executive Mark Sullivan denied early release. 3 years down, 2 to go, Jenna noted, settling into one of the visitor chairs. The judge wasn't impressed by his appeal for leniency. Nathan scanned the article. Mark's fall had been spectacular and complete. After the SEC investigation exposed the full scope of his financial crimes, he'd accepted a plea deal. 5 years in minimum security prison, complete asset forfeiture, and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer in any publicly traded company. "Any word from Lauren?" Nathan asked, though he already knew the answer. Jenna's smile held a trace of satisfaction. Still hiding in Oregon. Her sister finally kicked her out last year. Apparently, living off family charity gets old. She's working as a real estate agent now, trying to rebuild some kind of life. Her social media is enlightening. She pulled up Lauren's LinkedIn profile on her tablet. The woman who had once graced Seattle's most exclusive charity galas now advertised modest suburban homes. Her designer wardrobe replaced by practical business suits from department stores. The prenuptial agreement Nathan had insisted upon had left her with exactly what she'd brought into the marriage. Nothing. She tried dating another executive last year, Daniel added, until he Googled her name. "Your story has become quite the cautionary tale in certain circles." Nathan's phone buzzed, a message from Marcy Hill, now his CFO and trusted second-in-command. The latest quarter's numbers had exceeded projections again. She'd proven invaluable in rebuilding the company's financial structure after Mark's schemes were untangled. Speaking of success stories, Nathan said, turning his laptop to show them the stock ticker. Stephanie's Educational Foundation just partnered with the Gates Foundation. The board's decision to maintain funding was one of our best investments. Stephanie Sullivan, who had dropped the Sullivan name immediately after her divorce, had transformed her personal humiliation into professional triumph. Her foundation now operated in 12 countries, its reputation strengthened rather than tarnished by her ex-husband's downfall. Stephanie had remarried last year to a respected federal judge, their wedding featured in the same society pages that had once chronicled her divorce. "Did you see Mark's latest appeal?" Daniel pulled out a document. "He's claiming mental distress, says the shame and isolation have left him suicidal." "Prison tends to have that effect," Nathan remarked without sympathy, "especially on men who once had everything." The document detailed Mark's current circumstances, his assets seized, his reputation in ruins, and his former friends and business associates treating his name like a curse. Even after his release, the conditions of his plea deal would ensure he could never rebuild a semblance of his former life. "Lauren tried to visit him last year," Jenna mentioned. "He refused to see her. Apparently, he blames her for everything. Says if she hadn't pushed him to spend so lavishly on their affair, he wouldn't have needed to embezzle funds." Nathan smiled at the irony. They deserved each other. His intercom buzzed, and his assistant reminded him of the upcoming board meeting. 5 years after the scandal, Carter International's board bore no resemblance to the one that had witnessed Mark's downfall. Nathan had carefully rebuilt it with individuals who shared his vision, his standards, and his belief that loyalty and competence were inseparable. "One more thing," Daniel said as they stood to leave. Lauren's lawyer reached out again. "She's written some kind of memoir. Wants to know if you'd consider dropping the NDA clause in the divorce settlement." "Not a chance," Nathan replied, his tone devoid of emotion. She chose her story when she chose to betray our marriage. She doesn't get to profit from it now. After they left, Nathan walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, surveying the empire he had not only saved but exponentially expanded. The view reminded him of another night 5 years ago, when he had watched his wife's and business partner's worlds collapse. Now he watched his company's lights shine brighter than ever, each floor representing a new level of success built on the ashes of their betrayal. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Mark Sullivan's latest business venture, a small consulting firm he had attempted to establish after his first year in prison through a proxy, had filed for bankruptcy. Even behind bars, Mark had tried to rebuild, leveraging contacts from his glory days. But Nathan's influence ran deep. A single discreet word from him had sent potential clients scattering. A second message followed, this one from a private investigator Nathan still retained for monitoring certain situations. Lauren's latest attempt at reinvention wasn't faring any better. Her real estate career in Oregon barely covered the rent for a one-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood. The investigator's photos showed a woman aged beyond her years, the expensive procedures and treatments she had once taken for granted now far out of reach. She had tried dating within her new social circle, but her past clung to her like a shadow. One Google search was all it took. Stories of Manhattan's most infamous affair were everywhere, complete with a Wikipedia page documenting the cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. A knock at his door revealed Marcy Hill, tablet in hand. The Singapore expansion is exceeding projections, she reported. Ironic, considering it was Mark's failure there that helped us expose everything. Sometimes failure is the foundation for greater success. Nathan mused, gesturing for her to sit. Their weekly strategy sessions had become a cornerstone of Carter International's growth. Unlike Mark, Marcy understood that true power came from building, not taking. Have you heard about Stephanie's latest project? He asked, setting his focus back on the company's future. Marcy pulled up a presentation. Her foundation's educational initiative is transforming access to STEM education in developing countries. The Gates Foundation partnership is just the beginning. Nathan nodded, recalling how Stephanie had rebuilt herself after the scandal. She had taken the remnants of her life with Mark, the social connections, the foundation he had used as a tax shelter, and turned them into something meaningful. Her new husband, federal judge James Cornell, had been the perfect partner in her resurgence. The annual charity gala is next month, Marcy continued. Stephanie hopes you'll attend. It's at the Carter Museum again. The same venue where everything started falling apart for them, Nathan noted. The symmetry wasn't lost on him. 5 years ago, Mark and Lauren could barely look at each other there, knowing their world was collapsing. Nathan's computer chimed with an email from Daniel. More updates on Mark's case. His appeal had been officially denied. While the psychological evaluation confirmed his claims of mental distress, the court found them irrelevant. The judge's comments were particularly scathing. Mr. Sullivan's distress appears to stem not from genuine remorse, but from the consequences of his own actions. Did you see his daughter's wedding announcement? Marcy asked quietly. Nathan had. Mark's only child, Emily Sullivan, had married last month. The announcement had pointedly included her mother, Stephanie, and her new stepfather, while Mark's name was conspicuously absent. His prison sentence had made his attendance impossible, and even his attempt to contribute financially had been declined. The foundation is her main focus now, Marcy added. Emily's working with her mother, trying to create something positive out of her father's disgrace. Nathan's phone lit up with a notification, an alert from his building's security. Lauren had tried to enter the lobby again, claiming she had urgent documents for him. Like her previous attempts over the years, this one ended with security politely but firmly escorting her out. Still trying, Marcy observed. Still failing, Nathan corrected. Some lessons take longer to learn. A calendar reminder flashed on his screen. Dinner with Daniel and Jenna to celebrate their second wedding anniversary. Their relationship, forged from the ashes of betrayal, had grown into something authentic. Jenna's role in exposing Lauren's infidelity had not only earned her Daniel's love, but also a position of trust within Carter International's expanding legal department. The book deal rejection came through, Marcy noted, pulling up another email. Fourth publisher to pass on Lauren's memoir. Nathan didn't bother hiding his smirk. Some stories don't deserve an audience.